Well,
yeah, you were talking.
yeah.
Yeah, what was the whole time tuning again? That's
yeah,
what I want to talk about.
I knew I've heard him play. I used to sit and listen to him, especially in the daytime. Not necessarily when everybody was home, you know, boys would be at work or something. And I'd be there, and other kids, and all his grandkids, they couldn't be less innocent. They go out and play.
Yeah.
See, I'd go in the house and sit there, and I'd ask him to play. He'd get out a fiddle, and he'd tell me about these different tunings. He'd tune up his fiddle. As I remember, 3 different tunings he'd use. One of them was he'd tune up his counter and bass, or his D and G, a full tone, and make it what they call an A tuning. Leave his E and A same way. So that made E, A, octave apart, you know. So he'd play a lot of tunes like that. Then he'd lower his E string. He never did know what he was making, but what he's doing was tuning it down to C sharp. That made a C sharp, an A, and an E, and an A for his 4 strings. And which is nothing in the world but a open A chord. So that play, he had a drone all the time going. When anywhere he was in his home key, you know, any string was in tune with him. And that's what made it easy to play tunes for 2 or 3 reasons. You didn't have as much fingering, you played more open strings. And another thing, if somebody was going to beat on the strings for you, to beat time for you.
Yeah, they could beat gold strings, couldn't they?
Yeah.
If we ever do that again, we ought to have one fiddle tuned that way if we show it again, and practice first so I can play Lost Indian and some of those that are.
All right.
Although that Blue Mule is a good tune to do it in, but still that would sound better on that with the drones.
Yeah.
And let me kind of see which ones to do. What was the colored Galbraith's name?
Pumpkin Joe.
Pumpkin Joe, because he was light colored, yellowish colored.
Yeah. And his name was Galbraith, and he was one of 3 or 4 brothers, George and Joe and Doug. They were all named Galbraith, and their mother was Aunt Kizzy. And Lord knows who their father was. Fathers were, whether they're all the same one or the different one.
Yeah, caused by Kelly.
Probably all half brothers, what they were. And I wouldn't say absolutely certain whether it's all colored or all partly white. But, and then another tuning he tuned was, he tuned his high E string down to D. Leave his A and D as it were, as in the usual way. Then tune his G string way low down to D, so that made a D, an A, and a D, and a low D. He had 3 D strings on there. So that really made a good chord drone, you know.
Yeah.
And he'd play tunes like Bonaparte's Retreat on that.
Yeah.
And Dry and Dusty. That's another tune he played that way. Lonnie always played that D, you know.
Yeah.
Well, we'll play D on an open tuning, on a cross tuning. But I know perfectly well that he knew a gob of tunes, played in cross tuning, which he purposely used to play for dances.
Yeah.
Also, if somebody's going to play second fiddle with him, he could cross tune too, or he could.
Yeah, it's going. It's showing me. Now let's again, so I can put. Then I'm going to write this. What we agreed on the contest. First of all, judges must be fiddlers.
Yeah.
And secondly, of course, all have to be Missouri residents, naturally.
Yeah. It'll be a state contest.
It'll be a state contest. And of course, we don't feel it has to be in the same town each year necessarily. Do you? I don't think.
No,
so.
I don't think
it
so.
has to be at all. And it doesn't have to necessarily be in the center of the state. The way people get around now, it'd be convenient, but it doesn't have to be.
Well,
I'd have it in an urban. I'd have it in a large area so you could have a good crowd, or hope to get a good crowd.
Yeah.
And let's see then. All right, we want to. How many judges do you think's the best? 3?
Well, I at least 3.
At least 3, yeah.
Now,
And they're to be sequestered, in other words.
Yeah, I would have them sequestered.
Well, I think they should be. I do too. And of course, the fiddlers are not to talk naturally, and their tunes. I think Arkansas does pretty good. That the master of ceremonies comes out and puts their name and where they're from on a card on the stand out there, and announces their tunes, and that's it. And of course, they have to play them in that sequence.
Yeah.
Then, that it will suffice to have 2 divisions: an open division where anything Texas style or whatever goes, and a senior division, which by its own nature will probably limit it to old timey anyway.
Yeah.
Now, what would be the age on the senior division?
Well, I'd say
55 or 60?
55
at least,
and above.
And above, 55 and above. All right.
And everything up to, and not including 55 on the open.
Open, yeah. Now, but no hokum. In other words, the restrictions would be like no trick tunes like Orange Blossom Special and
Black Mountain
Rag
and Mockingbird.
Mockingbird. Now, I noticed in that Arkansas contest, they played some tunes where they picked the strings. Now, has that always been the objection to Black Mountain Rag? What's been the objection to Black Mountain Rag?
Well, partly
string.
that, but it's a cross tuning.
Yeah, but we're going to open cross tuning in this, aren't we?
I would. I'd let them have cross tuning.
Let them have cross tuning, yeah. Okay.
In both divisions.
Yeah, both divisions. Well, I think that sounds pretty good to me. Now, the ideal thing, what do you think? The ideal thing, I still think, would possibly be to have some regionals, if you had the money to do it. Now, let's see, they'd have to decide by population center. You'd have your North Missouri, I think, considering the population isn't that big up there.
Yeah.
Now, you'd have to have, I don't know whether you'd have to have a Kansas City and a St. Louis by themselves because of the population, or...
Well, I don't know.
Springfield would be a big area. Southwest Missouri would be one division. You know that, Southwest Missouri. And, of course, Southeast, I don't know how many you can count. Well, to keep it geographical, you'd have to really split your divisions up. I'd say have a North, Central, and a Southeast and a Southwest. I don't know if you can justify a North. Of course, it's going to cost more money. That's the trouble. You'd have to see what... And then have a St. Louis and a Kansas City? Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know if there's that. They'd have to just see how many... Of course, they don't have an organization in the first place. That's the trouble.
Yeah.
Right there. If they had an organization like Oklahoma has, they'd know exactly where their strong points were.
It'd be rather hard to segregate the corners. I was going to say you could have the 4 corners.
Yeah.
That includes St. Louis and the Northeast, you know.
Of course, I don't know how many fiddlers there are in Kansas City and St. Louis. I can see where that could possibly make her up, but then again, there may not be as many there as there are in Southwest Missouri.
That's right. I don't believe there is.
I don't think there is. So I imagine you just split it into Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, and Central.
Yeah. Now that might do it.
They give you five preliminaries,
Yeah.
regionals, 5 preliminaries, and have more than one winner though. I'd have like 3 winners from each there. There would be 15 for the final.
3 tops.
3. Now wait. We got our double divisions. So you're going to have 3 from each one. That'd be 30.
Oh yeah.
But you'd have to have a pretty active participation though, or you're liable to end up with all 3, maybe only 3 guys show up in Southeast Missouri to do the senior.
That's true.
But they'd get rid of them in the middle, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I think that sounds pretty good. And I'm thinking, if you had the right people in the state in on it, I think you could get support from areas, chamber of commerces and stuff. Well, I don't know if you could chamber. That's the trouble. It'd be the town where you're going to have it. You'd have to have your regionals in a population center.
Yeah.
You'd have to get somebody to put some money up. like Springfield or Joplin would be naturally here.
Also, were you thinking about having the regionals financed by chambers and donations, so
maybe
forth,
the
and
state
the finals by the state?
I would almost have the state maybe kick in a little bit, an incentive to get it started, to have something there to add to.
Yeah, to pull the fiddlers out.
Yeah, pull the fiddlers out. You're going to have help a man justify driving 100 miles.
Oh,
The
sure.
way gas is now and everything.
Yeah.
It's like I always felt so sorry for old Hank Thompson that time at Wheaton when his car broke down to boot.
Yeah.
And he didn't even place.
Several times it's been kind of weird that he didn't place and other good fiddlers didn't.
That's why he didn't go shooting in his driveway. He had a gate there.
Yeah.
I wondered why he was coming to such a stop. Get a little bit of ice. That's it.
You have
there, I got it.
You have I'll tell you another thing I think would be a definite requirement in all regions and the final would be pay your judges.
Yeah. Yep.
Because if you don't, you're going to get somebody say, well, I'll take it if it's worthwhile to me, but I'm not going to stick my neck out to judge a fiddler's contest among my peers, my friends.
What about winners in the final? They can come back next year or not?
Well, I've often wondered about that. That sounds a little selfish to. Now, in central Missouri, where the way they have them now, where the same fiddlers always come every time, that might be a pretty good idea. But where you're going to pull your regions together, I don't know. I just believe I'd let the guy come back if you.
Maybe limiting to what they do up there. They limit it to 2 years or 3 years. Was he 2 years straight? Wasn't he beat?
I believe that's the way they had it up there. I think
that's something that have to be talked about too.
Yeah. I know Dean Johnson used to come down. Dean is a good fiddler. He never was a pain in the neck about anything. He never raised any protest. He always just took what he got. But at Nixie, they banned him from playing next year. He did win a lot of times down there, but you just got to, if you get some impartial judges, you just got to admit that the guy is good enough to win, he's good enough to win.
Now, there's another thing too. Judges. Now, in your regionals, you couldn't afford to go bringing judges in. That's the thing. But now, guys, for your final, I think you need judges that are impartial. And I'm thinking, what do you think? They'd have to almost... Would you want to be in-state? Or now, in other words, I can see where if I pulled a judge in from, say, Tennessee, that plays pretty close to what we play, that he wouldn't know anybody here, probably. Of course, it would cost you some money to get him there, but still, I mean, ideally, I'm talking about what would be an ideal situation for a contest. If you had the money to spend, pay the guys expenses and maybe a fee, or gratuity. Wonder how that would be. Of course, now if you pulled in somebody from Oklahoma, they're going to be looking at a different type of fiddling that we play.
You'd get a lot of flack from people that say, well, if it's going to be a Missouri contest, you better have Missouri judges. But I don't know.
But your counter to that would be, well, Missouri judges can sit there and tell exactly who's playing anyway if it's some guys played very much.
That's true.
We wanted to go on their merits only of the guy's ability to play.
Now that Chuck Stearman's theory I know about bringing in Lonnie Pierce from Kentucky. Because a bunch of fiddlers come in from down there. But then he'd have...
Well, here he wouldn't have. He'd be just...
And,
now, a guy like Lonnie, he's going to be able to judge old-timey the same as he would progressive or anything. Don't you think? I mean, that's good. That's what I mean. That's the kind of guys I think would be What else was I thinking? There was another point too. Let's see. Something about judging I was thinking. I can't remember what it was.
Leonard Smith is, in a way, he's kind of cranky, but he's somebody to call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
If that guy's better, why, he thinks he ought to win. And if he bluffs up, he, on the other hand, he thinks that he shouldn't win.
Well, there was a lot of flack the year Ken Sloan won.
Yeah.
Because they came together, and they were together the night before.
Uh-huh. That's not good.
Of course, this year, you know, they made a rule about that.
Now, this Scotty Branscombe, of course, he didn't know I was a judge. I said, how you getting along with James O'Brien? Oh, he said, I'm going to play that in the contest. Then after it's over, he came around and said, I didn't know you were a judge. He said, I wasn't trying to butter you up, tell you so you know
like
me.
A nice boy.
I said, well, I know you anyway, but I said, I sure wouldn't let that influence me, because if somebody beat you, I'd give it to him.
Yeah. There was something else about judging I was trying to think of. Let's see. There's a point you have to figure out who your judges are going to be. That'd be something you really have to sit down and thrash out. But you want to pay them and get them. But I'll tell you, if you had a foot in the door with the state, you could get some pretty good funding, I think.
Well, I believe so. According to that, Paul Deming, he talked like it. Now, didn't he say that they funded the state up there?
Yes, yeah, well, that was the excuse that Shaw, what's the boy's name? Shaw gave me of why they could never move it, because that was the only town they had funding in. And he led me to believe that Columbia funded it.
Yeah.
At least I'll have to go back and read my letter again.
Well, now, the one time when I played and Lonnie played up there, you know, and I won fourth and Lonnie won second or something. The time that he gave you a $10 bill.
Yeah.
Well, that was Chamber of Commerce Columbia money. I just know it was, because that was mentioned there, that they let who's governor then? Teasdale.
Yeah.
Teasdale designated the state contest, and the city of Columbia funded it.
And I see somebody that knew Teasdale got in there and got Teasdale. I mean, you can get any of them to do it. Once they say it, then they can claim. But the thing is, if you only draw 11 people, something's being done wrong. No, I think now, like, you know, Arkansas down there at the Folk Center, they've got a lot of good things, but I think to have it open, that's not really an open contest down there at all. No. No, I think I'll write all this down. And we'll go over it again, and then sometime if that Deming guy wants to get together, and I don't mean to try and, the thing is, that's another thing. What about, are you going to have a women's division separate from a men's division?
I would
put them all in there together.
Yeah.
Yep, I think that's right. Well, go ahead. Well, might as well while we have it on. What do you think caused
well,
were you ever active in it?
No,
nobody down here was.
No, I belonged to it for just 2 or 3 years. And I also, at one time, joined the Kansas State. Just had a year of it there. I joined it when I was in through the consequences of New Mexico. An old boy from Emporia, I believe it was, talked me into it and said, well, I work close to you there in Missouri. Said, why don't you join our... So I did. I think it's just $3 or something, but later on I reconsidered, because I never did go out there. His name was Neff, N-E-F-F, and his initials was S-E, S-E Neff, so he just called himself Southeast Neff. And he's kind of a nut in a way. I think he's dead now.
Like this gal in Indiana.
Huh?
Like this woman in Indiana. or where is she? Nebraska. What's her name? The woman with the big eyebrows that put out that has the fiddle contest or something.
Oh yeah, D. Reich.
Yeah, yeah.
Dolores D. Reich.
Yeah.
They called her Dee. Now Jake fell out with her 2 or 3 years. She tried to run the thing, and she really worked at it. She wrote newsletters, typed them out, mimeographed them and all that, and sent them to a big membership. I think she just about spent a full time in it, and I think she had been maybe a music teacher. And Jake said, oh, said she tried to rule the roost, and that was against his grain, you know.
Yeah.
Jake nearly always had some.
Well, he was a pretty hateful little boy, or acted that way.
Yeah.
I can see where he could alienate people.
Well, he was so blunt about everything, you know, and he'd blurt out these orders, you can't do this or you can't do that.
This one, yeah.
But now
I know that gives. I'll write all that down, and then we'll see, and we'll go with that. And I would like to see him try, since we know now that the state is approachable.
Yeah.
At least according to that boy, and we made a good impression.
Yeah.
In other words, what I'm getting at, you can have something like the Council of the Arts would be part of the sponsor to the thing.
Sure.
So get the quaint folk in on it,
Yeah.
you know. Trouble is, I don't have time to follow through on the thing. That's the drawback.
Well, now, when Bob Walsh and let's see, was it Leonard, the other judge? Yeah, out at this fairground.
Yeah.
And me and I, we were the judges. And all the time we were talking about, we were trying, and I almost refigured something wrong. You got to mind your P's and Q's. You're overvalue a fellow, you know, or undervalue him, and you kill him.
Now there's something I don't understand it, but which do you think's the best evaluation method?
Well, I don't.
They get pretty complicated, don't they?
Yeah, they certainly do, and this one is Bob Christensen's. He authored the whole thing, and he's got 5 categories in it, you know, and that's too much. All you need is rhythm and tune and authenticity, or 3 things like that, you know. And he had, I don't know what all about clarity of tone and all that.
Yeah.
Bob walked this race, and he said, before this next year, now when we left out there, this Dan O'Hara, what his name was at KTTS, you know, Danny O'Day, said, now listen, right now I want to speak to you fellas right now, all 3 of you. I want you for judges next year. We're going to have it again. He said, just consider yourself notified right now that you'll be a judge. And Bob Walsh also talked to me down in Arkansas about, let's get together and make some sense out of that thing, and make a simple thing so we won't have to sit there and cudgel their brain to see whether we're going to kill somebody on his playing, you know. You know, quilt tops there. Mona wet her pants there, but
I don't know. She's got a pretty good eye. Well, no, but she's got a good eye, and she realizes that about 90% of these that are hanging out there for sale are machine done and all that.
Well, she can tell in a minute.
Well, you know, this winter, sometime we'll get Bob Holt and Bob Walsh.
And just formulate a new
and just sit down and
rules.
I'll have this typed out, and then we'll tell them what we talked about, and let's see if we can work out what would be a plausible and a good, and then maybe even sometime I don't think Christensen, look at the pretty flowers there.
Oh,
goodness gracious. That, I didn't even have this on.
Lonnie Pierce is in a way, a pretty good coordinator. He said, that's some of his theories. He said, now, you don't want to mark a fella too low, because you'll kill him, his incentive to come back. Give him, make the scores, winning and losing scores close together.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's
For
right.
instance, if a guy's going to total up 360 and win, let 320 be a loser, see?
Yeah.
But have that in that, and you've got to use your head on it. Like I started to say out there at the fairground, Bob Walter, we were sitting there together. He said, Art, said, do you mean what you're doing there? And I saw instantly what I said. Well, heck no, I put it in the wrong column.
Yeah.
He said, well, that'll ruin that boy, you know. So I changed my figures. We had that thing is on a score of 50. And you're not going to have but very few 47 to 50s, you know.
Yeah.
You're going to have some more like 38 to 44 as a median.
Yeah.
And then some old boy comes up there and he miscues and plays his waltz in the wrong place or something, you know. Well, you don't want to just give him 16.
Yeah, he got up there, yeah.
You don't want to give him 16 because I told him that an old boy did that down in Arkansas. Well, not this time. But I said, well, heck, anybody's liable to reverse his, go down his waltz, just get up there and be a little nervous.
Yeah.
I said, you don't want to ruin him for it. You want to mark him down, but you don't want to stomp him. And one thing about Leonard Smith, he'd say, oh, you got to give him something for trying.
Yeah. Well, that's not. In other words, keep the incentive there.
Yeah.
Have the scoring where you got a low difference between who wins and the old boy down there in the bottom, where he can at least look at that and say, well, my gosh, I didn't do so bad.
I didn't do so bad. I looked there.
Really need participation. That's the man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't but 20 points from the winner, see?
And then when I had this thing, we were also talking about how try and have as many paid places as we can, but make those top three pay pretty good, and then drop her.
Yeah.
But at least have a little bit of fee there for drop her down to $10 to maybe 7 or 8 places. You know.
Yeah.
Because that isn't going to cost you. And you can't tell me that if you went out and talked to the right people, you couldn't raise enough money to cover that. I think you can.
Well,
if they get some publicity out of it, some of these businesses, these farm businesses, and some of those that appeal to that, music stores.
Well, just like down at Wheaton, you know, what's his name? You know, Pete Pratt. He spent between every fiddler, you know, he ballyhooed the givers all the time.
Yeah.
Lions Club, you know, and Chamber of Commerce, so-and-so's a hardware store.
No, I think it could be. It would take somebody with some time, or people with time, to work it up. That's what it would do, and make sure it went off right. But now, that boy out there at the fairgrounds, how's his different from Kristen's? Kristen has all 5 categories, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He didn't have that out there, did he?
No, I don't. I believe it's a little different one. I think it's.
Well, what do you think's the number needed? 3, was it?
Not over 3 or 4 categories, because 3 is enough.
What did you say? What are the 3 that you mentioned? Clarity? No, what was it?
I had 3 when I made up one time for Roy Craft when the Bluegrass Club when they have one. I made it in 3 categories, and I call it tune, time, and I had 3 T's. Let's see. Tune, time. Forget what my third one was. But anyway, if he goes up there and says he's going to play ragtime and he plays Village Low Ground instead, why that's a violation of his tune category. See? You want to lower him right there. If he breaks time on it, you want to tone. That's the other.
That would be time and
time, tune, and tone.
Yeah.
All right.
In
Oh,
other words, that's probably,
yeah.
Christian probably in the clarity meant a guy was not sour when he played.
Yeah.
That's the,
Yeah.
and that would be under your tone, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So you can simplify the thing, not have as many categories.
Yeah.
That's what Bob Walsh is talking about. He said, heck, no use having all them, just group them under others, you know.
Yeah.
Time, tune, and tone. Now that is my three things. If it's out of time, there's a violation. If his tune is wrong, that's out of
If
violation.
he plays it too fast, that'd be
Yeah, yeah,
time. That'd be time.
that'd be time. Then if his tone is poor, he has a whole lot of sours in it. Just keep that in mind that his tone's not good.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that we had to use in the Christmas thing was
He's a big one.
Now, we listened to this Arkansas contest here.
Yeah.
I forget what it was. Some old boy. Oh, you said, oh, he's playing that away too fast. You know, you got to take that into consideration. If you now Roger's Fountain. Anytime he plays a hoedown, he ruins it by
Just so fast, yeah.
because he's been used to playing as a
Stage.
showman. Yeah, as a showman.
Yeah. Well, see, that's good. That kind of. Now, oh, there's another thing too. Who's going to qualify? What about Dale Hopkins if he were to show up for it? Well, you've got a professional. He is. He makes his living doing it.
The one. Some places have a rule that if you make over 50% of your income as a musician, you're a professional and not eligible to play. Of course, now
That's going to be hard to ever enforce.
Yeah. Now Dale Hopkins down there at Golden, you know, somebody said, well, he plays these country music shows all the time. Well, he does, anyway, and he doesn't pretend to do anything else.
Yeah.
So he's, by all technicalities, he ought to be barred because he's a professional.
Because he's a professional.
But it would make him mad.
Well, of course, you can't worry. You want it. It's out of fairness to the other contestants that you're doing it. Little boy that plows fields all day and then comes in and has to practice when he can.
Yeah.
This is his only shot at ever really getting up in front of people and maybe getting a little honor from it, you know. A little.
Right. And if a dark horse wins, it's going to make a fan out of him. He's going to go to the others. He's going to have fun out of it.
Yep. I don't know. I can see a lot of things that need to be worked out.
Well, it's been going on for years, controversies about,
of course, you take Bill McNeil could get you a copy of what Ford's rules were. That'd be easy to get. Those are available. And also the big Atlanta contest that they make so much of back around 1920, you know.
Yeah.
When the Whippoorwill poem was written, you know, about it.
Charles Wolfe wrote about it.
Yeah.
In The Devil's Book.
Yeah, that's right. It'd be easy to get hold of what their rules were.
Now, Charles Wolfe would be somebody
Charles,
who'd be a good consultant.
Charles would be a good one to talk to. Yeah. Well, I feel like far more than Rusty or some of these in Jeff City. I think Charles has much more experience actually participating in these things.
Yeah, he's been down there. I'm in the Country Boys interview.
Yeah.
Rusty's got a lot of theory, but he doesn't have too much practice.
Practical have time.
I think
That's a lot of difference between Bill And Charles Wolf is that they have really been out amongst them.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference.